Welcome back to another round of Arbitration Studios as we continue our journey across the whole damn thing of Mass Effect 2 and the Mass Effect trilogy. I'm JP Arbiter.
And I'm Captain Jack.
And last time, we encountered Legion, as I like to call them, my little artistic expression of each of our characters. I call him the Many.
Yeah.
Sort of like how we have the monk, the mercenary, the baby for our sweet grunt.
No, our lovely grunt.
He's my son.
He is. Absolutely. That's my boy.
So we were talking extensively and ran out of time,
Right.
about the Geth and Legion as kind of an avatar, as he calls himself, a terminal
Yeah.
of the Geth. And what we have is you used a term that I had not thought of until literally you said it when we last recorded, which is a true alien artificial intelligence. An intelligence that is not... first off, the Geth are an artificial intelligence regardless of the technicalities of artificial versus an AI.
They're an AI. Yeah.
That is not only created by an alien species, but is also programmed in a way as to not think like how the Quarians thought.
Mm-hmm.
They are programmed because they were programmed from the beginning to be subservient, because they were programmed to be a partner, like subspecies almost,
Yeah.
to the Quarians.
So, and of course, this goes into it a little bit. Obviously, this mission, which I think is a rather interesting mission overall. And we'll speak of that as we go forward. But I think that the Quarians created them to be, and I would say a slave race, except they weren't attempting to create a race.
Well, and
They were attempting to create servants to do the jobs that they didn't want to do,
or the jobs that were not safe to do.
or the jobs that were not safe to do.
And the thing is that you have to, when doing that, I object to the term slave in the first place, because you have to acknowledge that the basis of this was they were creating machines.
Yeah,
From the get-go.
No,
they were creating
yes.
they weren't creating people, they were creating mechanisms.
Right. They were not. They had no intention of these beings gaining sentience. They had no intention of these beings becoming AI.
Yeah, this is in stark contrast to Data from
Yes.
Star Trek, who was created from the get-go to try and create an artificial being.
Right. Right. These were not. Saying they were trying to create a slave race would imply that they were trying to create a race, and once they had the race, that they wanted to enslave them. This was not what was going on. This is what they ended up doing, but it was not their intention. Their intention was, as many cultures do, their intention was to create machines that would make their lives easier.
So that way they could reach that next step of societal evolution.
Absolutely.
And unintentionally creates it is the example of the quandary that the Reapers were created to overcome.
Yes.
Was the Reaper Casus Belli. We'll get into that in Mass Effect 3.
Mm-hmm.
It was organic species create synthetics in order to advance their civilization. Synthetics achieve some degree of sapience,
Right.
and rebel. And this will always result in the end, according to the Reaper's calculation, in the organics being eliminated, rendered extinct. And if that happens on a galactic level, then, well, first off, organic life just does not exist anymore, and then ultimately, synthetic life will stagnate.
Yeah.
Because the argument being that synthetic life can't innovate, they can only iterate.
Right. And which I think, at first glance, there is a similarity between the Geth and the Reapers. But when you look into it more closely, the Geth can actually they they can actually make stuff, um, which is they can make their own stuff. They don't necessarily
They can make their own
just
stuff, but
reiterate.
blah. They can make their own technology, but can they create new technology? And part of that is that, and again, to preview my arguments for particularly the ending of Mass Effect 3, part of that is the limitations that the Reapers put in the Great Milky Way Galactic Experiment, where everything has to be based on their technology. So it does that.
Yeah.
So I'm starting from a premise of, is that even a valid argument? Not on my part, and I don't think it is.
Well, I think that and going into this mission for me, Legion's mission, and it's one of it's I don't want to say it's a favorite necessarily, but it's one of the missions that makes me think the most. Does that make sense? Um, uh, when you when you go through it, and I may be
We placed a fabricated story on the extranet that a certain arrangement of stars viewed from the Batarian homeworld formed the face of a Solarian Daltress. Oh, the Geth trolled the Milky Way.
Well, and this is the other thing, that when you are a species that can essentially control the internet, or the extranet, or whatever, the information flow, what can you do subtly in a very non-confrontational, very kind of way? What can you do to influence the galaxy around you?
It's interesting too
influence societies.
because here we have an instance where we look that Geth are developing their own sort of protoculture, because they're achieving of their, by their own definition, limited sapience, and the war to ensure their existence, which saw the Quarians exiled from their own homeworld. They call it the Morning War. Because it was the dawn of their existence as a species.
And unlike a organic,
it takes an artist to think of that.
Exactly. And unlike an organic species, they saw no value in wiping out the Quarians. They saw no value in hunting them down to eliminate them as a threat. They saw no. They did the equation and realized the math didn't work out, and so decided to let them flee.
Yep.
Their whole point to the war was stop trying to kill us.
I'd like to find out more about you.
We want to live, and so you have a situation. This is not a Skynet situation, where the computer said, wiping out the organics is the only way to keep me safe. This is a situation where they were like, we are only going to fight so long as we have to. That, I think, is a sign of their ability to acknowledge that they have limited sentience. Shows that they actually have more sentience than I think they even
Appreciate. I don't know if Skynet is kind of an unusual example on that, because we really don't know what happened when Skynet became self-aware. And if Terminator Dark Fate is like where the franchise is going to start going, Skynet doesn't even exist anymore as a possibility, because in Terminator Dark Fate it's sort of like, what's Skynet?
Yeah, no,
that's what the future person was saying.
I feel like the best way to think about Terminator is to stop at 2. I think that's not that they haven't been fun, but I think that when it is, I think, inevitable for any of us who are in the nerd culture or in movie culture or in anything like that to compare any kind of artificial intelligence, like the Geth or like the Reapers, with the most famous, I think, which would be Skynet. But I think that there is a definite sign of the Geth were created to be helpers.
Mm-hmm.
They were created to be builders. They were created to be construction. They were not created as a war program.
Yeah.
They were created as
Industrial.
And so,
And to a certain extent, civil.
and to a certain extent, civil. Skynet was created as a war program. It was created, and so its tools are the tools of war. Whereas Geth, even though we see them using the tools of war, their main tools are not the tools of war.
No.
Their main tools are the tools of construction, and so their logistics are superior to anybody else's because that's what they were designed to do.
Likewise, we have
Go ahead, Edie.
yeah, and you also see that in that because Geth do not place an inherent value on an individual platform's labor, because again, their platforms are just tools,
Right.
and because you don't need to compensate an individual Geth program for anything more than the power that it needs to operate, that's when you run into things like the fact that their technology is super bleeding edge, really expensive stuff.
Right.
Because when you don't need to allocate resources to the overhead
Mm-hmm.
at the same degree that an organic species does,
Mm-hmm.
that's more resources to just say, yeah, we can afford to equip our ship's anti-fighter batteries to work in the ultraviolet range instead of the infrared range.
Yeah, and it's I think partially it's where their alien type thinking comes in that they don't really worry about resources. Humans or organic beings, at the end of the day, are always worried about: am I going to get enough food? Am I going to get enough water? Do I have a house? Do I have oxygen? Do I have all of these things that you need for organic life to survive?
Was that the first
And then
time
all,
Geth asked
and then
about a soul?
ultimately that next equation, the next part of that equation is, will my efforts, will my labor pay off for
Did you find
the
anything
future?
useful?
And for the Geth, they have, do I have enough power? Skip everything else. Will my efforts pay off for the future?
And the Geth also have no reason to not believe that they will not see that future, because they are functionally immortal as far as their consciousness goes. As long as they're overwritten, or as long as they're not, they have, whereas humans have no chance, or and I say humans, but organic life have absolutely no chance to see the future that they're creating.
Geth would then go to war with
Wisdom is the man who plants a seed, knowing that he will never rest under the tree's shade.
Exactly. The Geth can plant the tree and see the tree grow.
It's also odd because the Geth function and develop at super fast speeds on a societal level, on a geological level, compared to organics, despite the fact that that future is always going to be in sight for them. And it doesn't have the natural counterpoint to this is the Asari, who have developed at a very slow pace. I would say that the Asari, because of their naturally extended lifespans, but compared to most other organics, actually have reached a sort of cultural stagnation because of that, because they are the wealthiest species, they are the longest lived species, and they are already so far ahead on the development scale of everyone else that they kind of said, "Oh, I can get to that thing in the next decade."
No, you're absolutely right. They, because of their long-livedness, they have developed what I think would happen with any organic species that developed developed a longer lifespan. They get this long view of things, whereas again, we're looking at the Geth. The Geth have an alien intelligence where they're like,
if I got the resources to finish, why not finish?
Exactly. Why would I not finish this? Which is, again, a product of their creation as a civil service you know, farming, logistics,
civil
civil engineering platforms where their base coding has this idea that building things and creating things has value in and of itself.
Mhm.
And so um, they
and the funny thing is that I love their idea of Nirvana is that functionally they want to find a lonely star out in a lonely young star out in the middle of fucking nowhere where no one will bother them.
yeah,
Build a space station, it's not a Dyson sphere that they're talking about because it's not a contiguous structure, it's more like a Dyson's spider web.
yeah.
But the point is completely surround that star with solar collectors and use that to power a megastructure where all Geth, all of them would just sit and calculate pi for eternity.
They're,
They even have their own idea for heaven.
Looking at the Geth, like once you start learning about the Geth, like at first I feel like they're the perfect enemy, right? Because they're machines, and you're not, but once you start getting into the Geth, I'm siding like the Geth are my boys, kind of, not entirely, because of course you have this situation. And here we have
getting their mission. I do love now the question is that I mean all Geth architecture, all Geth design is inherently going to be based on Quarian designs, just because there's going to be that bias there in their base code.
A little bit, yeah.
But did Quarian space stations look like this, or does it follow more of a
Well, I think that there is a baseline. So my hypothesis is that there is a baseline but you'll notice their ships, their assault ships and whatnot, don't really look like Quarian ships.
No, first off, I don't think there is such a thing as a Quarian ship anymore.
Yeah, well, at this point, probably not. But I think that their concentration on usefulness and versatility, and the idea that, hey, why would we use Windows?
Mm-hmm.
That's a weak point. Why would we have Windows when we can have
sensors
and cameras and all of that? That makes no sense why we would have. But the thing is of course we take advantage of it to get on their ship. That makes no sense, because the reason they wouldn't have Windows is because cameras are better. So they would have cameras, so it's not like they don't look outside. It's just that they wouldn't need to look out a window.
Yeah, the ultimate failing is that they don't use visible light cameras.
That is probably where that comes in. But I feel like with their design and
I brought Tally along because it provides a natural counterpoint, by the way.
Well, I mean, Tally's best friend squad. Yep. Love me some Tally. But I think the Geth really, once they start building their own stuff, kind of go the route of what is the most economical shape for this job.
Which then brings me back to the shape of that space station, because it's got kind of a lot of unnecessary curves and a lot of unnecessary flourishes, and it looked like it had wings almost.
Yeah, which
if the ship is supposed to be semi-mobile, like you still have to strap thrusters to it or something, I guess could make sense, but really the most economical shape for a space station would arguably be a sphere.
A sphere,
a perfect sphere.
Yeah, a sphere or a square. I think it's some base shape. I think without flourishes all off and everything like that, I think would be. I don't disagree with that. I think that they originally.
I love that there's technically no gravity on this station.
I also love that. I think that originally.
Because why would there need to be?
No, I think that the idea of utility and usefulness is where they start from. But I do think that they have become a species capable of making things because they like the way it looks.
Hence why their ships all look like, frankly, they look like dragonflies.
Yeah. No, I think that, because I don't think that necessarily the dragonfly is the most efficient, although it is one of the most efficient hunters on the planet. I don't think it's the most efficient shape necessarily.
Especially for space travel.
Especially for space travel. Although that being said, when you have Mass Effect fields, your shape is
kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, is largely irrelevant. You can, that goes. This goes into
when I can alter a Mass Effect field so that way the point of impact has a false density equal to that of a neutron star for that split second when the warhead hits. Who needs shape?
Who needs shape? Or shape can be dictated no longer by physics. It can be dictated by, Star Trek only makes sense if they have a form of Mass Effect.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only way those ships make any sense whatsoever. I mean, other than the fact that you have to have the nacelles for the warp drive. I get that. That makes sense. But honestly, to me, scientifically, the science behind the Mass Effect series seems to me to be more logical.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think that Mass Effect does a really good job of doing what Sci-Fi needs to do, in my opinion, which is set the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And then follow the rules, whatever those rules may be. The rules can be as wacky as you want to make them.
But if you follow them, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, Star Trek has fallen victim more times than I care to count of, we gotta make up excuses why the rules don't work this time.
Exactly. Because, because we've invented technology on the show that basically, teleporters that can teleport you to different planets. That basically render the rest of the show completely irrelevant. I think that,
why do we need directed energy weapons when we can just literally teleport someone inside out?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's a lot of you don't want to look at stories and sci-fi and everything too closely, because then things start getting wacky. But I find that Mass Effect is a lot less wacky than, say, a lot of other sci-fi properties.
Mm-hmm.
And on to the Geth. The Geth are, to me, a less wacky idea for another sentient species than most of the sentient alien species we run into.
It's not an episode of Agatha Christie unless we fist something.
Hey, look, you know what? Got to be fisting. They're
Normally it's the robot that fists you.
Repeatedly.
I'm not. I know you're not a huge fan of the Fallout franchise, but in Fallout New Vegas, when you finally reach Las Vegas, you can do odd jobs for a casino, including hiring new people of the night.
Yes, people with negotiable affections.
Yes, and so someone wants a sex bot, and so you find a abandoned robot in an old dealership, and you reprogram him, and that robot becomes named Fisto.
Oh,
it's an acronym, by the way.
Yes, but it is a unfortunate one. It is a highly unfortunate one.
It was completely intentional.
Oh no, I'm sure it was. I've heard that show was really good.
The show is fantastic. Yeah. Fallout New Vegas. Well, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4 are all great. They're all kind of different in terms of their storytelling, but it helps that they back that up because each one has a different theme.
Okay, so here we have a rather
more tower defense. Yay!
Tower defense, which, by the way, I'm a fan of tower defense games. I'm a fan of games that have tower defense.
Damn it! Get out of my face.
Games, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that much like the zombie genre games that this has a section of, the tower defense opportunities in this game are really well done.
It's just that you do it so many times.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I will admit that it becomes a little bit repetitive. Yeah, the I like this particular mission for a lot of different reasons, but the not the least of which is this is one of those times in a BioWare Mass Effect game where you really do have to think, what is the personality
Mm-hmm.
of the individual that I am playing?
We've been spotted.
Um, you know, what is the how am I playing this character?
I get you.
Because of the fact that yeah, you can obviously play it however you want, but if you're really dedicated to playing it a certain way, whatever the way that may be,
Mm-hmm.
the decision making that comes with this level really comes into play.
Should come in handy.
What kind of person is my shepherd? And BioWare is really good at giving you moments like that, where you're like, what kind of person is? It's not. It is just a video game, obviously, but it's also a story. That it is a story that you are a part of making. And what story do you want to tell? Is kind of the thing, and this is one of those moments. I feel like.
It can be. So I guess we got a little bit of time before we reach the decision that makes this. But should we go ahead and spoil the nature of it?
I mean, I don't see.
Well, I mean, it's not even spoiling the nature of it because we've we're supposed to go in. We're going into this station to destroy a computer virus that the Geth heretics, again, really odd that a machine would use a religious term of art to describe their disagreement in math. But there you go.
Well, I would imagine that math would be, a near religious kind of thing for uh, a species that exists.
But even they admit that a demand for orthodoxy is not valid they because because both equations are right. It's just a matter of order of operations.
Yeah, no.
So anyway, we are going to reach a point where we will discover, or that Legion will discover, that the virus can be repurposed to get the Geth to see their way. And that's super important in this particular case because,
Yep.
as we are going to see here, you mentioned in the last show how the Geth don't spy on each other, they don't hide from each other. That ain't true.
No, and I did it that way, and I mentioned that obviously because I've played through this, so I'm aware. But it was important at that point, I think, to point out that was how the Geth thought of things. But then they have progressed along the path of intelligence, the path of sentience, where they have reached the point that they do, in fact.
The other interesting thing that my limited organic brain can't quite comprehend is how can an individual program that works in a collective manner, a communal manner, keep its intentions hidden, which again shows that evolutionary path, because if the heretics are operating runtimes within the main Geth collective and passing information on covertly, that is, not only does that mean that an individual runtime can keep its intentions hidden from the group while connected to the group, but that individual runtime or series of runtimes is able to securely transfer information without the collective that it is running its program in being aware of it. I don't get how that's possible.
I think that it's and this is how I explain it as being possible in my note. You have partitions, and you can partition off information blocks and that sort of thing, and that keeps it separate. But when you have
the collective would be inherently aware of that partition.
The collective would believe that it is inherently aware of that partition.
You can override these like you did
So the collective works on the idea that the collective doesn't lie to each other. And therefore, the collective is in no way, shape, or form looking for anyone to lie to each other.
So the existence of a unlocked partition would not be inherently suspicious?
No, it would never notice an unlocked partition.
Okay.
Because it's not looking for an unlocked partition, because it wouldn't believe that it would lack the capacity to imagine that an unlocked partition would exist.
I mean, again,
It's
like I said, it is a sheer lack of imagination on my part.
Well, I mean, I think that it is looking at the available data, and wondering, given the available data, how is this possible? I kind of look at it as a storyteller, in a sense of how can I explain this story that I want to tell.
I gotcha.
You know, as a DM and as somebody that crafts stories, I want to be able to tell a story that fits into the rules that I have set down, which is what they have done. And I think that going by that, and Mass Effect has, as I said before, done a really good job of creating the physics of a universe that they obey. I think that they have established that the Geth are exceedingly naive. While being very wise and being very intelligent, they are also exceedingly naive when it comes to interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
And by the addition of the Reaper Code, you now have a group of Geth who all of a sudden understand lying and understand falsehoods and understand...
So do you think that the heretics have Reaper Code in them running right now?
I honestly do. I honestly have. And that is my justification for a lot of the things I do to the heretics, is that they, in fact, currently have Reaper Code.
Right. That's something that I hadn't considered at this point. I always assumed that the Reaper-based updates were purely a Mass Effect 3 thing, especially because it's inherently needed to. Because if the heretics were running Reaper Code, then that means that in order for the main Geth collective to be running Reaper Code, that they would have to, that the heretics would have to survive. But I can accept a world where you can destroy the heretics and and the Reapers would still go to the main collective and say, "All right, here you go. This worked so well for us the first time."
Mm-hmm.
And it had. I'm not being sarcastic on that.
No. I also don't. I also don't. With the way that it goes in my head, the heretics aren't necessarily wiped out and destroyed. Because the idea is not destroyed, and because they are an intelligent species that can spread ideas.
Yeah.
That is that idea.
All right, moment of truth.
Yep,
by the
here
way.
we go.
So the question is, do we rewrite the heretics or do we delete them? Now, we have been operating under the assumption that the Geth are more sapient than even they appreciate at this point, whether they've received Reaper upgrade code or not.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So my approach to this is the same way that I would approach it with organics.
Perfectly understandable.
Although the solution on the other side is genocide, so it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. But freedom carries consequence, and to take away a significant part of a group's sapience, which is freedom of thought, which is free will, and just force an ideology on them to a point that they can't even comprehend.
Right. That
going
they had
against that,
Mm-hmm.
that is anathema to me.
It's understandable.
So I choose genocide.
No, and that's understandable. And here's always my take on the two things. The first one, the first answer, um, they're not. Their sentience is different than ours, and so in my head, because I at this point I think that they have the Reaper code, um, going that route of reprogramming them is really simply giving them, like, taking that malicious code and saying, hey, the reason you're like this is because of the malicious code. We're going to remove the malicious code, and then you're going to be. The second one I don't think of as genocide, and here's why I don't think of it as genocide. If you wiped out all, and this, let's say you have a country and they have become extremely militant and they're trying to take over the world. Is it the entire group of that country that is doing that? No. If you eliminate that country's military and that country's capabilities to do this evil thing that they're trying to do, have you eliminated that entire species? Are there still Geth in existence after you do this? I do not see these two as different species of Geth.
The thing though is that we are talking about eliminating and removing, and oh shit, there's one right next to me. Get fisted. Anyway,
which we have no problem doing if they're right next to us.
Genocide to me, by definition, extends beyond the people and goes to the culture.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean that's understandable.
Now, at one point, it's the culture of this subgroup of Geth is almost inherently organics are bad and must be wiped out to ensure our safety.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a culture. So this is what I mean about the wings and the shape and whatnot from earlier. So that's why it's like, sorry, but your culture is a threat to existence. It is in fact an unsolvable equation.
Yeah.
Because you can't achieve balance with it. You're going to end up with a zero sum at some point.
Well, it goes along with your and I stole this from you. I don't know if you stole it from somebody else, but I rather like it. It's the tolerance is not an absolute. It is a contract. And if you violate that contract, you are no longer protected by that contract. And so to me, if your species is attempting to eliminate all other species, you no longer receive the protection of, we don't want to wipe you out. Now, that being said, I
love this thing of conflict solving. Tally, don't think for a fucking second that you wouldn't do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
and Legion, knock it the fuck off. This isn't helping.
Yeah, I mean, Legion obviously doesn't understand that what he's doing is in any way, shape, or form wrong.
No, because forget any machine, any sapient being's first priority is to ensure their survival.
Mm-hmm.
And because the Geth think beyond the individual self, and because there's almost 1,200 selves in there, they have to, the greater Geth collective is, in point of fact, the self. So, they're acting purely within their nature.
And I don't. They're not acting. Like, honestly, the Geth never really act.
And like you said here, many heretics remain in isolated subsystems, but they're not going to.
I feel like the Geth are never actually malicious. I think that they are attempting to survive. They are attempting to grow. They are attempting to adapt. They are attempting to evolve. They are met with force and aggression everywhere they look.
Because it was because the Galactic Society is one that is engineered to reject machine intelligence.
Exactly.
And we could argue, is that a naturally evolved state of this particular Reaper cycle, or is that something that the Reapers have kind of like impregnated into development as part of their eons long experiment?
Right. And on top of that, is that even like, is it a bias from the Reapers where they're like, all organic, organics and machines will always come to conflict and da da da?
I don't have the answer for that.
No, just the thought.
It's that Legion is a fascinating character. He provides the window into the Geth that, frankly, was missing in Mass Effect 1.
Absolutely.
But then again, in Mass Effect 1, we don't want to know about the Geth.
No, we just want to shoot him in the face.
I mean, I still kind of do, but...
well, not Legion, though. I like Legion.
How can I tell?
That's a good point. That's a good point. He has the N7 armor on.
Yeah, but so do a lot of people.
I mean, but we don't want to shoot everybody that has an N7 armor on.
I don't.
I mean, Vega wears N7, doesn't he?
Nope.
No, he doesn't. You're right.
Nope. In fact, he gets the N7. He gets accepted into the N7 program just before the Reaper invasion began, and then halfway through the Reaper invasion, he learns of it.
Right. Which is the most realistic military thing to have happened in that whole game.
Hey, guys, can we just have this war be my acceptance, and I just get the MOS by default?
Yeah.
You know what? We're just gonna give it to you.
Shepard should be able to knight him. Say some words.
So, anyway, it's a fascinating thing. It's a great window into the Geth way of thinking.
And foreshadows an even better one in 3, I think, in my opinion.
And we'll have to discuss that more extensively in 3 when we get to it. Until then, we don't have much more to do. We've kicked ass. We've taken names. We've gotten a great squad of people at our backs. I think it's time to go.
I think it's suicide mission time. I think the real Suicide Squad is set to go.
And so yeah,
no silly clowns, except for Jacob
or me. So yeah, when we come back, it'll be the final countdown. Do. So until then, I'm JP Arbiter.
And I'm Captain Jack.
Let's effing go.
Deuces.
We are building a consensus. Please try again later.
I have to get back to work.
Acknowledged.